Welcome to another podcast of the Georgia Track and Field Cross Country Coaching Collective. I'm Coach Andy Christie, joined by Coach Nick Pustelakis. And if you've seen any of our other podcasts, we're starting the collective along with Chris Mayer of Athens Academy. And the whole goal is just to spark conversation, to talk about topics that are pertaining to coaching, to share our experience, but also hopefully, we'll learn from what other people have to say in terms of these topics. And we welcome you to reach out to us if you have topics that you'd like to discuss or us to discuss on future podcasts. If you'd like to tell us about things you'd like to see on our website, anything at all. We're just starting this as a passion project to discuss all the things we love about coaching. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Nick so he can tell you where you can find us on social media and the internet.
Yeah, if you are interested in reaching out to us, we want to be a resource to any new coach, an experienced coach, and somebody that could educate us as well. So you can find us on Twitter at TFXC Collective. You can find us on Instagram also at spelled out Georgia _TFXC _collective. Or you can find us on our website at Georgia spelled out TFXCcollective.com.
Awesome. So today we want to talk about policies and procedures, which, maybe on the surface doesn't seem like a glamorous thing that you have to do as a coach. It's obvious, but us coaches just love getting out there and coaching. But to do that, we have to set up a structure that works for the team and the coaches, the coaching staff. So that's what we kind of want to dive into today in terms of, what rules do you set forth and what attendance policies and how do you communicate that to the runners and parents, the athletes. So I guess to kick us off, Nick, I'll ask you this, like what do you think is the most important thing in terms of like those rules and procedures? Like what stands out to you when you hear those two words in terms of what
rules and procedures? All right. So in other words, if you want to have a consistent program that can produce the most out of your athletes, then your athletes need to be held accountable. Okay. So what does that mean? If a kid is showing up consistently, they're being held accountable by being trained correctly, and they should see the benefits of their training and they should see good results, which is how I try to connect the dots with our athletes and our parents. For us, consistency is the key. If we can get kids to show up consistently and train with a purpose, goal oriented, we're going to see great things. So for me, our attendance policies are of the utmost importance. If a kid is showing up once a week, or if you allow a kid to just show up for the meets, you're going to be undermining your team and the kids that are showing up regularly and consistently. If you are allowing kids to come and go as they please, basically what you are advertising without verbalizing is you are telling people the training isn't as important as you think, as we say it is. Come as you please, you can still participate in the meets. And that's not okay. That's not how you're going to build a strong program. That's not how your kids are going to build confidence and become better athletes. I view rules and procedures as the catalyst for success. If you don't have consistent rules and procedures, you're going to have an inconsistent team. So for us, we have to be consistent with how we hold it, and that's not easy. That is possibly the toughest aspect of coaching is fighting the small battles that are important for the culture of the program. Taking on those tough parents who have a strong personality, may have a strong influence within your community, and how can you stand up for the morals of your program and the standards of your program against someone so influential in your community? It's not the easiest thing. A lot of coaches choose to back down, which ultimately the program will suffer, the development of the athlete will suffer when you compromise those standards, if I'm making sense right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And I think to kind of elaborate on something you said, I think coaches, I know I had to figure out, well, what's important to me in my program. And for me, you know, when I started being a head coach 23 years ago. And so I went and looked at other programs that I admired, and I was like, I'm gonna look at what they're doing, and then I adapted. You know, I borrowed a lot from back in the day, Brookwood and Jerry Arnold, and you know what they did, and I figured out, okay, what do I like out of this, and what do I want to have my own spin on, and try different things. And sometimes it's been trial and error for me, but I first had to identify, well, what's important to me in my program, and how I want to convey that to the parents and athletes. So that's one thing I did was borrowed from and still do uh,
Absolutely.
from other programs. The other thing is I have to find, for me, I have to walk the fine line between not overdoing it with like, oh man, they have to read this huge list of things, but also because I don't want it to feel like, you know, they're having to read a dissertation. But at the same
Correct.
time, I need to anticipate potential problems and how, and to be able to say, well, that's in the handbook, and that's in what you signed up for. So, and I mentioned handbook. That's another thing I've done is we now have a team handbook, and it used to be a separate thing, like a behavior contract. Now I've incorporated that into the handbook, and when they sign up for the team, they sign off saying, I have read the handbook and agreed to these policies and procedures. And to me, that's a great way up front to go ahead and ensure that they've read them. And if they haven't read them, of course, that's on them, but they've signed off saying they've read them. So anyway, I just said a lot, but go ahead and feel free to take
No,
that.
and to your point, Andy, yeah. So we start off every single season with the handbook. It's a 2-page document, front and back. And I sent it out electronically. It's a Google document, which makes things much simpler. Back in the day with hard copies, I used to ask for signatures, but now it's all signed off online. And so it's very easy. If you have a communication app with your program, you can send out those documents out there. And that's what we do. We do have a preseason meeting, which in the past, since the pandemic on, it's been a Zoom where I have gotten on and parents would get on, we would interact, they'd ask questions, I'd go through the handbook. And before the pandemic, used to be an in-person preseason meeting, parent meeting, where we get volunteers, where we collect fees and all that great stuff. But what I do early and often is I communicate the program's expectations. That's the most important thing, is to let the parents and kids know beforehand exactly what you're going to want from them, exactly how you're going to operate, and exactly what the communication process is. If a kid's going to miss because of academics, because of medical, because of family emergency, whatever, those are all legitimate reasons for an athlete to miss. In my program, for me personally, this may differ coach by coach, but for me personally, and you asked me this earlier, and I apologize for not answering it right off the bat, but for me, the number one aspect that is the most important is an athlete being present at practice. Our practices have meaning. There's a purpose for it. Our practices are sequenced out for the betterment of the athlete when it comes to training. I want the athlete there. If an athlete is not there, I feel like it is all for naught. So I want the athletes there. And let's go back, Andy. When we start every single practice, I literally run through and this may not be plausible for everybody, but in my program, I'm a 7A program with over 120 high school athletes in it. I literally go down a list in alphabetical order, boys and girls, and I call out every single name every single day. So every athlete in my program knows that the head coach is going to be calling out their name. And if I don't hear here, I'm going to repeat the name again and again and again until I know that they're absent. That's enough to hold the kid accountable, to know that they're important enough that their name will be called out, and we will document if they are there or not. That shows the kid that we want them there, that somebody's going to be holding them accountable on a daily basis for their attendance. And then after that, okay, communicate. There's students first, athletes second. Academics, they're there to get an education. A lot of our kids, we offer after school tutoring in our school. So a lot of our kids have to go to that. That's their priority. And we encourage them to go to that. But however, if they're going to come late, They need to come with a written pass from whichever adult they were with. If a kid shows up 30, 45 minutes into practice with no pass from anybody, they're sent home. That's considered an unexcused absence. And that message is consistent. And that's the best thing you can do is be consistent early and often. You will, if you can fight those battles early and often later on, everybody will fall in line. The parents understand what your expectations are and they will fall in line. If parents know that you're going to be lenient, then they're gonna toe the line, just like any high school kid in your classroom will. They're gonna test you and test you and test you and see how far you will let them go. So you need to be consistent with whatever you're putting out there. So to your handbook, to the point of your handbook, we have a handbook, 2 pages, that explains everything from attendance policy, behavior policy. The first thing I have in there is whatever school policies that our school board has set in place for our athletes, or excuse me, for our student athletes in the building during the school day also applies after school. If it's a school board policy, it's also a track and field policy or cross country policy. It's not just my policies. We're going to follow all the school's policies first, and then we're going to have additional policies like attendance, uniform, classroom behavior. If you get in trouble in school, how are you going to handle that? If it's not in writing and all of a sudden you're arbitrarily throwing out these random consequences to your athletes, please expect pushback from parents if it's not somewhere in writing that was presented to them before. So the best thing you can do for yourself, for your program, for the standard of your program, is to give this stuff out immediately before an athlete even shows up to a workout for you, in the form of a handbook, an electronic document that you can email out, something that they can access off your team website, they can pull up. We do Google Documents, so we try to make it as hassle-free as possible for the parent and the athlete to sign off. Our handbook is 2 pages, front and back. They read it, and then there is a spot where we ask that both the athlete and at least one parent or guardian sign off that they have at least read it. And I have parents that want to say, I don't agree to this. Well, that's not asking that you agree to it. That's just asking that you were presented with what the policies are. And I'm not trying to spin words here, but that is very important. It's just that you understand that you know where to find our policies. Whether you agree or not is not the question. It's were you exposed to the policies so you understand how our program is going to operate. If you can remove all those hurdles, you will have a much easier path as a coach to running your program with the standards that you want to run the program. But the key is communication beforehand. And a handbook is the best way to do that beforehand.
Completely agree. And a lot of what you said, we do something similar. And again, we said this in other podcasts, we're coming at it from the perspective of 2 7A coaches, bigger schools. We know that some people have different cultures and different classifications, and maybe a lot of your parents aren't on online as much, or social media, or digital documents, and so you can do the hard copy, old school way, and that's fine too.
Right.
But I give them, ours is a little bigger, but I incorporate the season information as well as kind of our handbook. So we have a 20-page thing that's 10 pages of that season's vital information that everybody needs to read. And then I sell them pages 11 through 20. If you're new to the sport of cross country, read those pages. And that's just simple, like, here's how you score cross country meet. Here's what's a dual meet versus just the 101 kind of information, so that the veterans, I'm like, don't worry about the second half. You just need to read the first half and then you're good. But I give it at the information meeting. We go over it again. Well, it's sent out through email. It's on our website. And then in August, since we've gotten maybe a couple of people during the summer, we have our parent information meeting where we go over all that again, so that they've been exposed to it at least 2 or 3 times, and I make sure everybody understands as we head into the season that, okay, here's what we're doing, and now we can go forward. Then to your point about attendance, absolutely, they've got to be there. I mean, and that's where, as a head coach, somebody's got to decide what they can deal with in terms of how they get attendance. And maybe it's an assistant coach. Like for me, one of my assistant coaches handles it in cross country, and the kids sign in and out. I love the way you do it too. I think that's awesome. we do sign in and out so that we know when they get back from the trail run or whatever, oh, they made it back and we don't need to go, send out a search party or whatever, a little different than
Right.
track. Hopefully they're not getting lost on the 8 lanes of the track. But the assistant coach lets me know, hey, so-and-so missed and I didn't get I didn't hear why. And then I, as the head coach, go down that path and find out what's going on. But whatever way people figure out how it works for them, you just got to make sure it's something that's not going to be a headache. And sometimes you might you might get through the first 2 or 3 weeks of school and realize this is not working, and you might just need to adapt. And I would say, for me, at least my perspective is, do that. Put something in your handbook that says, like, coaches may make changes as necessary, so that you have the wiggle room. If you're like, wow, this is not working, I need to change the policy, and just put something in there about coach's discretion.
Always, yes.
Yeah. So, and the last thing I'll touch on that you said that made me think of this, clubs. I obviously, as educators, we want our kids to be well-rounded and be, involved in different things. And I'm not expecting them to drop everything to be a part of my program. But a few years ago, we started running into a problem where kids were going to clubs that met every week, and they were missing a day or two of practice every week. And I was like, this isn't gonna work. And so I started saying in my handbook, they could miss every other week, but it was 1 day a week, maybe with a prior approval, or that they could come late. They couldn't miss practice. I think that's actually what we went to. They come, but they couldn't miss practice, and they had to have a ride. They couldn't just be like, oh, I had a club meeting and then I couldn't find a ride. No, plan ahead and find a way to get to practice. And that cut down on a lot of issues for us, because at a certain point, a kid might just have to make a choice. Do I want to be in the club or do I want to be on the team? And I think communication is so key in that regard. Talking to the coach, if they're the athlete, talking to the coach what it is that's going on with the club. But also, just if they're not there, they're not hearing announcements, they're not getting the training, and then it becomes just a bigger issue, because they're not there and you're not getting the things they need to get to be successful.
Yeah, when you allow your athletes to be, now every program is different. We have so many different events in track and field that you may not have the resources within your building to be able to properly train a kid in a certain event, and they want to seek a private coach, especially for your field events that are really skill-based, technique-based. If you have a throws club, a pole vault club, whatever it may be. And specifically in the pole vault, let's just use that as an example. If you don't have a pole vault coach in your building and you have your athlete who's a pole vaulter, but they're belong to a club and that's their primary coach throughout the season when it comes to technique, how are you going to, allow that kid to miss your program, to miss your practices? Now, if you don't have a pole vault pit, and the only way that athlete can get better, or if you don't have a coach that can properly supervise and coach the technique of the pole vault, it's probably best for the athlete to allow the athlete to go to the private coach. So what I look at is, okay, put your ego aside, because I know what I want as an individual, but what I want as an individual, I got to put myself in check at times of what's best for the athlete. Unfortunately, within my program, we had a coach, a longtime coach, a great coach, who had some medical complications and unexpectedly passed away. So I had a few athletes a few years back that had to seek external help within the pole vault. So as a coach, I can be like, listen, their pole vault practices start at 6 and that's an hour away, which means that you're going to be missing some of our, I could penalize my kid because of ego and be like, you're missing some of my practice. But really what's best for them is I didn't have the expert there that can teach them safely the technique of the pole vault. So I had to make concessions for them to be able to go early and go work with their other coach for their safety and their betterment, because my program at the time couldn't provide that type of instruction. So ego aside, what's best for the kid, and make those concessions for those kids. However, if you are making concessions, when I say concessions, I'm saying just like ignoring your rules and policies. You're very strict with certain kids, but then all of a sudden this elite athlete in a certain event, you're letting them get away with it, but you're holding others accountable. What you are doing at that point is you are undermining yourself. You're undermining your entire program, your credibility. Not only will the athletes question you, but then the parents will question you. And when the parent goes an administrator and then administration gets involved about all this, well, now you've caused yourself a lot of time consuming issues that's taking you away from doing what you ultimately want to do, is train kids. So if you can be as consistent as possible and communicate as much as possible with the parents of what the expectation is, if you can provide something in writing that they can continue to refer back to, you are eliminating a lot of these headaches and issues that us coaches deal with, which can lead to burnout and ultimately coaching turnover.
Yeah, and that, I think, yeah, if you have been consistent and communicated up front, then hopefully, you know, people's athletic directors are going to have their back if something
Yep.
comes up that's, you know, things are going sideways. And even they might even have a good perspective that you hadn't thought of. Like, for example, a few years ago, I had something in my handbook that where if they had a certain amount of behavior infractions, they missed a meet that was later in the season. And my AD at the time had a really good point of, well, what if the kid did that early in the season and then has corrected themselves, but yet they've got to miss this meet that's 4 weeks away. And so I was like, you know, that's a really good point. And so he encouraged me to change it to like miss the next meet so that it's close to when they had the infraction.
Yep.
They've learned
Yep.
their lesson, and then you move on. And that really helped me. Instead of, oh yeah, you've been better, and now a month later you've still got to,
Yeah.
you know, be penalized again. So
Right.
that was really helpful for me, hearing that from administrator. But yeah, I think it's just got to be what you can live with, and yeah, not making exceptions. Like you know, it doesn't really matter where the kid is on the team. I'm going to hold that kid to the same standards as I hold the people at the top of the team, the varsity kids,
Correct.
because they'll notice that. Like you said, the kids will notice whether, no matter where the person is, they're going to notice if you are letting some people get away with something and others not. And that's
Correct.
just going to cause a problem.
Our high school athletes are the best at sifting through all that stuff and figuring out what's real and what's not, what's consistent and what's not. Kids will know real quick because they will test you. They are the experts at testing policies and procedures. They're experts at it. They will know, they will test you to your limit. So if you truly believe in what you're doing, for us and within our program, for me, attendance is number one, right? Attendance is number one. Them being there is the most important thing because I equate absence to lack of caring. And if a kid doesn't care, I need to move on to the next one who's gonna care, because that we can make progress with that kid. If a kid really doesn't care and they're not motivated internally, and I've done everything I can to show them that they can be great, and here's what we're gonna do, and yet they're still not responsive, I got to move on. I got to put my focus and attention onto the next kid that really needs it. And when you have 100, however many kids, you got to go to the ones that really care and want it. So for us, attendance is everything. Obviously, behavior and how you treat your fellow teammates and your coaches and your classmates is absolutely is just as important. The culture of your team is important. So if you allow your best athlete that can run around that over the fastest, or they can jump the highest or the farthest or throw the far, if you allow that kid to get away with attendance and character issues because they're really good at that, please understand you are only causing issues for yourself down the road. If you hold your better athletes accountable and you hold them accountable, everybody else sees that. Everybody else falls in line because they understand that if you're holding the best ones to that standard, you're going to hold everybody to that standard. So it's extremely important that you are consistent with your policies and you follow through.
I think the last thing I'll touch on with this is, it's really helped me to reach out to other coaches if I have a particular situation where I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I haven't encountered this or I haven't encountered it in a while, and I'll reach out to other coaches and just be like, hey, here's what's going on. How would you handle this? Or have you had something similar? You know, and pick another coach's brain. Obviously, can do that within the coaching staff, but sometimes it helps me to get an outside person's perspective on something like that. But I know that, kind of touching on what you just said, it's just not worth it to me to have that battle. Like it's better off being without someone who just doesn't want to follow the rules versus um having the headache all season long of, we're going to go to battle with this person every day at practice. That's just not worth it. So it's so nice when the kids buy in, and they're teenagers, they're going to make
Yeah.
mistakes, but our jobs, hopefully people feel like part of our jobs is to help them with that, help them navigate their decisions, and um building character through athletics like we're trying to do. So um like you said, if you don't show up, then how are you going to get better? How are you going to hear the messages that we have to hopefully deliver to them through these activities? um Any final thoughts, or you feel like we touched on things well, I'll give a shout out to someone else real quick. Dealing with attendance, Chris Carter, now at North Gwinnett, used to be at Brookwood, gave me a great idea of, if a kid has missed, I think it's 4 practices in our program, then they've got to come to 4 straight practices before we're going to let them in the next meet. That's for cross country, and that's just so sometimes it's a safety issue if they just haven't been at practice and haven't been running. Let's say they've been sick. Well, we need to get them back to being consistent before we want to throw them in competition. So that's a real good one. That usually encourages kids to be there, even if it's not a sickness, but they know, oh, I'm getting near, the total, then I need to be there, so I don't have to worry about missing whatever meet it is that they're concerned about.
Yeah. Your program will be treated to the standard you keep it to. In other words, if you allow kids to come and go as they please, if you allow kids to only show up for meets, if you allow kids to leave practice early because they got to go to their AAU basketball or whatever it may be, then understand that they're going to treat your program how you treat it. If you keep your program to a high standard, if it doesn't matter where the popularity of your sport is compared to any other sport within the program, it's irrelevant. They're not the same thing. They're different seasons or whatever. If you allow kids to get away with a lower standard, they're going to give you a low standard. If you hold your program standard to a high standard, the school, the community will rise to that level. If you hold your program to a high standard, the community will rise to that level. But it's going to be, you might have people laugh at you. Oh, it's track and field. Nobody can. No, it's not true. Track and field is one of the most participated sports in high school, period. Globally, it's universal. Track and field is known globally. Just because it may not be the number 1A sport here in the United States of America doesn't mean that people don't know. Everybody knows who Usain Bolt is, correct? So if you hold the standard of your program high, it may not be day one. It's not going to be day one. I can guarantee you that. They're going to have to continuously see you hold your program standard high, and then everybody will match it if they want to. People want to be a part of things that are great. People want to be a part of great experiences. People want to be a part of those. So if you hold your program to a high, great standard, and you literally hold your athletes accountable, hold your parents accountable, hold your coaching staff accountable to a high standard, you will see the fruits of your labor, and all that stress and that you dealt with, it will pay off, and your kids will benefit for it. They will have a much better experience for it. If you allow your program to be third rate, if you allow your kids to miss your practice for other sports, especially club sports and things like that, understand you're going to get that third rate effort from your kids and your parents also. What the standard that you hold is going to be what they mean. Your kids, your program, your community. It doesn't matter where you are. People want to be a part of greatness. So where you are, it doesn't matter. You can set that standard high, and you will get greatness from your community. You will. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take some perseverance, but you can do that. Absolutely.
Yes, I saw something online the other day that if you have been consistent like that, then sometimes it won't even have to be you, the coach, that's telling the kids that. The kids will be like, "Oh no, that's not how we do things around here."
Correct.
And they'll course correct the new
Correct.
Kid that maybe just doesn't get it yet. They can help out if you have the right culture. So
that's culture. Yeah, that's the definition of culture. When the kids are doing it themselves at that point, it's running itself at that point.
And then that way you won't maybe be the team that's, oh, we need 2 legs on the 4x4 because so and so already left, and
right.
That's
Right.
the stuff that it leads to if you let
Year
it.
1 and 2, we dealt with that. We don't deal with that anymore because
Yeah,
that wasn't acceptable.
yeah, gotcha. Well, hopefully what we've had to say is helpful to some of you out there. Again, you can find us on social media. You can find us on the website. If you contact us, our emails are on the website. We'd love to have, if you have a document about this topic or any other topic, contact us. We'd love to get more documents to put on the website. Any feedback is welcome. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you very much.